Let's talk a little bit more now about the cyber attack and what we can expect this week. I'm joined on the line by Adrian Weckler, technology editor from the Irish Independent. Adrian, good morning to you.
Good morning, Susan.
Adrian, you heard some of the headlines there in the papers. Obviously, the health service is very much bracing itself for this big data breach that is threatened to come tomorrow in the dumping of this confidential patient information on the dark web. I suppose what are we likely to see happen tomorrow?
Well, assuming that that does happen and that we start to see medical data dumped on the dark web, either sold or just dumped, you're talking about, thousands, maybe millions of instances of our, personal records. We don't actually know quite how much the hackers have. There's talk of a 700 gigabyte file, but it's still not quantified as to how much that actually is. So the big worry that a lot of people will have will be what happens next in terms of when it's dumped. How does that turn up in my life? Who gets to see it?
Mm.
Is it just criminals who pour through it, and do they start using it for scam campaigns? Do I start getting dodgy emails? Do I start getting more dodgy texts, more dodgy calls? Because most of us are already getting those over the last year or two. Or could that start leaking into things like friends WhatsApp groups, neighborhood busybodies, and conspiracy theorists? So I think that's the concern, other than the actual disruption that's ongoing at the
Mm.
moment, which is serious enough. I think most people's concern now is going to be where actually is this going to turn up, and how is it going to either damage or embarrass me?
What measures then are being taken to mitigate against some of that damage that could be caused?
So the Garda and the HSE have essentially both said that they're on high alert. They've dedicated teams now to keep watch over the typical likely sites on the dark web, or areas of the dark web where that's likely to be dumped. We do know, of course, that the other day the government got an injunction in the High Court against the sharing of that information. That obviously will have no currency whatsoever on the dark web, but it is a marker to anybody who might think of sharing it or WhatsApping to
Mm.
their friends here, that if you do in any way engage in sharing any of this stuff, whether you're just trying to point out how shocking it is, or you think it's amusing, you could be in very, very big legal trouble.
Mm.
But as to whether they can actually stop it being dumped, they can't.
You're writing, Adrian, in the Sunday Independent today, kind of around our attitude to matters of defence and how that has historically been quite lax, and it's all part of why we've been so exposed in this situation.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting problem that we find ourselves in terms of what our response could have been and what it is. To be clear, the response from the HSE, the Garda, from everybody involved has everybody acknowledges that it has been, tireless and strong, and they're doing everything they can. But there is a larger question that we're going to have to address in the coming weeks and months when this immediate emergency calms down, and that is whether or not, and really it's not, uh, in terms of our scale and how we can actually respond to attacks like this. And the point I'm making today in the Sunday Independent is that we've never prioritized cyber defense. And one possible reason for that is because when it comes to things like cyber defense, we link it to other areas of defense. We have two attitudes to that. One is we think either it should mainly be for international bodies like Europol, or bigger countries like the UK next to us. And then the other attitude is that we historically don't really like to think of ourselves as spending money on defense related stuff. We have a cultural aversion to spending money, for example, on military or defense for very reasonable historical reasons. But that is partially now coming back to bite us because we don't have the type of national cyber security center set up that other countries we have. We're ranked 23rd in Europe in terms of cyber defense capability. So something's got to give there.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, one of the big questions, or one of the things that we've heard said, say, particularly this week, is that it was unusual for our health service to be attacked, that normally these cyber gangs, they, target a private company or a group. It doesn't kind of put as much heat on them that this had. But that we're hearing that it was possibly because our system was just so weak or so exposed that it was actually too tempting for them just not to do it, even though they knew they were getting into deep water.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, if you think about a gang like this gang, the Wizard Spider, the Conti ransomware gang, they're responsible for dozens of ransomware infections every month, and their modus operandi is to get in, infect the system, get a payment quickly and without much public fuss, hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of euro, and move on. In this case, the system that their malware happens to have landed in, because I don't think many people think that the HSE was targeted for it being the HSE, the government won't pay a ransom. Now, that was foreseeable, that a national state would not pay a ransom to get the ransomware out of the health system. So, and that may be why, and we still don't know exactly, but it may be why the decryption key or a decryption key appears to have been handed over. We still don't know 100% whether that will do the job. Stephen Donnelly, Health Minister, yesterday said that that's still being tested, but that the signs look positive. But yeah, in terms of the HSE's IT systems, we know half of them still run Windows 7. Official support for Windows 7 was discontinued over a year ago. Now, to be fair, the government does, the HSE does pay a supplementary fee to Microsoft to protect systems. But yeah, there has to be a conversation among ourselves as to whether or not we think cyber defense is something worth investing in the HSE or anywhere else.
Yeah, and I think our view on that may have changed after all of this. But my thanks to Adrian Weckler, and you can read his column, as I mentioned there, in the Sunday Independent today. And just to mention, our own Jess Kelly actually has a great video. You'll find it on News Talk's Instagram. I presume it's up on News Talk's Twitter as well. But it's just about all of the things to look out for over the next couple of weeks and months and possibly years, depending on how long these scams could go on for. But basically, it's to look out for anything suspicious at all. Call the people back. She's got loads of advice in it, so do check it out and just be really, really careful over the next while that you don't get caught out in any of that stuff. But my thanks to Adrian Weckler there.